Well, I would like to welcome everybody to the next class. And this class is called The Power of Finding Contentment Early. And it comes from the Buddhist training of eating once a day and sleeping on the floor. So at some point very early in the day, Buddhist monks will eat, and that is the end of their consumption for the whole day. They're done. Except they might take some tea in the evening. So there's a reason for this, right? And we're going to talk about that today. Just as sitting in contentment in meditation can tell us a lot about our energies and how they often work in the background to try to control our present moment. Ending physical consumption does the same thing, right? If we end physical consumption at a certain time each day, it can tell us a great deal about our physical body and how maybe the chemistry that we are living with can sometimes be working against us and trying to control our present actions, right? Like meditation for the mind, this type of daily fasting is like sitting in contentment for the body. So we would eat once a day, or we would eat, that's how I would do it. But you would choose to take into your body only that which brings health and nothing else, right? And if you can do it once a day, then you can shut down this whole concept of consumption completely at that point. So that's the type of consumption I'm talking about. This allows us to analyze how past physical experiences can exert pressures on us to control the present moment, right? When we limit it to only the things that are healthy and limit the time of consumption, we'll see that some things argue against us, and that these things were always present, right? And they were causing problems. So it's true, our bodies are sometimes so focused on repeating pleasurable events that our chemistry challenges our attempts to change, right? Our attempts to do something new. So we begin to lose the ability to choose our own direction. And that ability is being taken away by our own bodies. By chemistry we ourselves have placed there. This sounds familiar? So again, we are the perfect healers to go in and fix this type of thing. Really, when you think about thinking itself, often we, or the part of us that's in the present, is kind of passive and is often listening to our thoughts. Thoughts that are coming from actions or events from the past, right? So if we are not careful, we can end up listening to our own urges and really just being a person who complies, right? That simply follows, But it doesn't always start out this way. It never starts out this way. It always starts out with conscious thought, and at times it leads to this place. Really, we could use smoking for an example, right? If you've ever smoked, in the very beginning, it was a choice, right? It was a conscious choice. It wasn't any chemistry in you yet. But we decided that we wanted to try smoking because our friends liked it, and we thought it might get a girl, or whatever the reason was. But even after a couple of days or a few weeks or a few packs, this decision is still, every smoke be confirmed in the conscious moment, right? We agree to smoking, and now we're agreeing with this chemical impulse, and everything's cool, right? It is an act of cooperation all the way around. But at some point, this cooperation begins to fail, right? As part of us decides not to smoke. But at that point, we begin to realize that this thought process has become secondary to the urge. But we did not notice it till we begin to quit, right? For example, if we say right now that we're going to quit smoking today, consciously we are making that choice, but our bodies will be unable to follow, right? So there are two perspectives, right? One, our consciousness, and the second, our body, whose memory is the chemistry that we put into that body itself. and that chemistry demands, response, right? But there's no denying that we begin to have two perspectives. One, our conscious thinking wanting to quit, and the second, our body wanting to continue, right? We are no longer following just our thinking. We are beginning to respond to cravings, right? And if those cravings are not satisfied, our body begins to defend itself and smoking, bringing purposeful emotional discomfort to ourselves in the present. And this is what the Buddha considered the pain that we could not get away from, right? That much of it was caused by part of our bodies having a preference that was not being met. And because of that, it would strike out and make us pay in some way. Emotional pain is sometimes caused by energies working against themselves in our own bodies. Really, this feeling that to continue the past is an evolutionary trait that probably was very, very healthy for much of our evolutionary lives, right? Our body follows a very simple path of repetition to ensure survival, and it makes sense, right? It would be wise to do what we did yesterday to survive today, because yesterday we survived, right? So there's a certain amount of intelligence in following repetition, and the body has fallen into that, and really now this is where these cravings are coming from. So why are things so unhealthy now when really this is kind of a healthy response? Well, it has largely to do with changing the food supply, right? Our evolution and the signals are tuned to a natural world where sugar is only so much of a percentage of a product, right? Salt is just a little bit, right? And that amount alone was enough to cause us to search for that food out. But now when we have foods that are such concentrated amounts of these beautiful items that the body requires, it is hard for the body to say no, right? And once that response to repeat that process is initiated, the body can see no reason to stop, right? It simply will not stop on its own. It's hard for the evolutionary mind to understand that repetition is now causing us pain, right? Because of this, our repetitious habits do not maintain health, but actually destroy our health. And our health system is full of diseases that are inflicted because we continually repeat unhealthy processes of eating and smoking that we do not stop, right? Repetitious habits are the leading cause of illness and death on this planet, probably. My teacher would call it orbital thinking, and he would call it circles of energy holding us in place. So I drew a document about how this works, right? How we have an event that really is enjoyable, and how our consciousness begins to want to repeat that cycle. And let's take a look at how that really affects us. Here, I'll bring up the photo in a few seconds here. Well, here we have the diagram on orbital or gravitational thinking. This diagram describes how an exciting event in our life can often lead to wanting to repeat that event. And it kind of takes a look at, the math behind that kind of thinking, right? So here at the very top of this picture, we've got contentment and obtainment, right? So this is when the experience happens, right? The experience that is so valuable that we just cannot let it go. And the Buddha would have called that attachment, right? Our love becomes attached to a specific type of event. But that feeling of contentment, right, starts to wane very soon after that event is done, right? And all things on this planet have only a certain lifespan, right? So they only last for so long, right? For that reason, as what we love so much and have attached our love to, as it begins to disappear in our life, pressure and worry and anxiety begin to build up, right? Because we now have less of what we want. And this begins to become less and less as time goes on, because it seems to be in a one-way circle. And anxiety and worry and pressure continue to build up until finally that which we have attached our love to is now gone forever, right? The opposite of obtain. It's all gone. So now we live in discontentment, and have lived in discontentment from the very moment that we began to worry about how much, we were using, or how much time had passed, right? And well into less and less, right? Now gone. And still, now our job becomes more important to find this item again, right? And so we begin to use more and more of our energy that began with simply being content and finding something joyfully, is now being used to push and to pressure and to find this thing that we no longer have, right? Until finally we begin to have a plan and we can see how it's going to come about. But anxiety and worry and pressure do not go down. Now it almost heightens, right? As we work this plan to the very end, and finally we reach obtainment again. And for a few moments we are content, right? Finally, we have reached this state again, right? But we know that this state is temporary. And for that reason, more and more, pressure and worry and anxiety will begin to build up in the future. But when we look at this diagram of this kind of gravitational thinking, right, we begin to see that really contentment is only just a few moments, and the rest of it is discontentment, right? So we describe this as a moment of contentment only because our mind is focused only on the prize, right? But when we look at the whole event, for this is one single event, we see that this is mostly discontentment. And for that reason, this is a description of discontentment in the mind or in the body, right? And in meditation, when we are sitting in pure contentment, or with the body, when we are sitting, in fasting after having everything that we need to be healthy, but not one bite more. And then we call it at that time and say, now we will have nothing else today because we have taken care of our bodies. And everything else after that point will be discontentment. You'll begin to see that these wheels will show up, right? Because sitting still, or setting a time limit where we are no longer able to consume any longer, puts a great deal of anxiety and worry on pressure, on a part of our consciousness that wishes to obtain something. We are now holding it back, right? Meditation, or this type of fasting, daily fasting, is now holding back part of our energy that wishes things beyond our needs, right? So these are the energies that we begin to work with to heal, right? And we do not heal this energy by feeding it again so that this circle begins again. We heal this energy by not feeding it, right? By allowing this wheel to disappear, right? Because not only this wheel is interfering with our meditation and our fasting and every other aspect of our life, but there are many, many wheels in the backgrounds of our consciousness, right? This one can interfere with this one, and all these could fight with this one. And so we have all this internal conflict, all our energy working against themselves so that we feel weak, right? But true contentment is not reaching this point here and reaching this point here and here and here and here so that all the wheels are lined up in pure contentment. It does feel good, and that does happen occasionally. And that's when we feel we have reached a point of contentment. But true contentment in the Buddha mind is to remove this wheel, and to remove this wheel, and remove this wheel, until this blackboard is completely empty of energy that is working in a circular fashion, right? Only one energy does that we allow, and that is the energy of consumption of the things that we need each day. the food, right? The medicine or whatever we need to take in each day so that we can remain healthy. But we decide each day what that amount is, based on our knowledge and our wisdom and our study. And then we have that amount and we try to have it at one sitting. And then we are able to say at that point that we will no longer be able to consume, and for that reason, we would begin to put consumption behind us, right? When we do that, we end up with a blackboard that is easily taken care of because that consumption of food each day is taken care of early in the day, and the wheel kind of falls asleep. And no other wheels exist in this blackboard. For an empty blackboard is true contentment, right? Contentment is having an energy that sits in the present calmly and peacefully without needing a single thing after it has had the few things it needs to survive physically each day, right? So gravitational thinking is unhealthy, right? And we can recognize these things when we look at the things that we cannot stop doing, right? The things that we take an inventory of, right? The things that we have to do each and every day, right? After a while, these things become our cravings and our habits. And like anchors, every time we have one, it's like throwing an anchor into the water, holding us in place until finally our lives are nothing more than repeating our habits and our urges daily, and we are unable to move in any new directions at all because we're being held in place by repetition, right? So anyways, that's the little drawing I did on gravitational thinking, and now we'll move on to the next section.